Thompson. And for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, Ramona Shelburne and Kendra Andrews had an article on ESPN kind of encapsulating the final moments of Klay Thompson in Golden State. And one of the last kind of images they had and stories was Klay Thompson going out to golf at Riviera Country Club, where Joe Lacob is a member there. Very beautiful golf course, one of the nicest in all of United States, hell, in the world, if we're going to go there. And Joe Lacob invited him. He was his guest. You know, they kind of aired their grievances, and I don't think it was a last hurrah for either of them. It was just kind of meeting in the middle and saying, you know what, we both meant a lot to each other, and it's time to go our separate ways. And Klay Thompson went his separate ways from the organization, and I think they just needed to, you know, play some golf, and sometimes it's all it takes. And you're back on the course now, Sam Lubin. You get it. Even if you're not even good at it, like just getting out there and just having some peace and quiet and getting to chit-chat and stuff like that and small talk. Yeah. It could be great for a guy whose mentals were shaken like a Klay Thompson. I think that meant a lot to him. I hope it did. And hopefully when he does come back for the jersey retirement, all that sort of stuff, it's going to be on a positive note. Because I think it will.
I think he still could get the statue. I don't think Clay's...
You think he's a statue guy, by the way? Some people think only Steph deserves a statue.
No, I think it's all three of them.
Okay.
Steph, Klay, and Dre, they're going to be there. The only question is, do you have the statues together, or do you space them out somewhere around Chase Center? Those three, you cannot tell the story of the last 15 years of Warriors basketball from when Steph got here. And it feels like it's been 40 years, not 15. You can't tell the story of the Warriors without those three. You can't. If you have Steph up there, it's like, well, where's the other two? Okay, Steph and Draymond. Well, then where's the third? It's like, I think the Giants have had similar conversations with Bumgarner, Lincecum, and Kane. You know, like it makes sense to have a statue for Tim Lincecum. He was the franchise who turned this thing around.
Can I get Barry Bonds before Timmy?
Well, that goes without saying. I'm skipping some steps here, but you make that. Well, Tim Lincecum, he changed the organization. Madison Bumgarner, he's the playoff hero. Well, if you're gonna put those two, don't you need to kind of put Kane? Like, I'm not saying that big three is on the level of the Warriors' big three, but I think the conversation is the same. If you do one, it's kind of hard to justify not doing the other two. And if you do two, then you have to do three. So I do think Klay still gets a statue, but we're making this about owners and how owners make people feel. We were talking about, the Draymond impact on Klay leaving. You mentioned how, John Fisher has you feeling a certain way about the A's. Joe Lacob, he's got Warrior fans feeling a certain way about the Warriors. He also had Klay feeling a certain way about kind of what his future is going to be. And, and Kendra alluded to it yesterday.
I actually have the sound, Sam Lubman.
Well, let's let Kendra talk about that, actually.
Kendra Andrews yesterday on
let me put words in
the
her
morning.
mouth.
Yeah, please.
It's the radio.
Thank you. Morning Row, Spontaneous and Shasky, Kendra Andrews at ESPN, who covers the team, joined them talking about Lacob's negotiating tactics, not working with Klay Thompson.
Because Joe has done this type of negotiating tactic before, where you do play the long game. You take a colder approach. You don't discuss it as much, but eventually you offer the money and you get the deal done. You saw that with Draymond, right? You saw that with Steve. But I'm told that with Klay, he has a very different mental, right, than those guys. So the question was, by the time, if the Warriors do find a deal that works for them and they present it with Klay, is it too late? Has he already separated himself in his mind from the Warriors? And that's what we're seeing. That's what we saw happen. And that's what that was. It was this, okay, let's go play golf and let's see what is discussed. Let's see if they can bring my mental back. And nothing was even discussed. And so at that point, again, what was already probably brewing in both of their minds was just solidified. The fact that nothing was discussed there was nowhere to go after that.
And that tells me, you know what, that they agreed to disagree, kind of, and they went their separate ways. And that final golf trip at Riviera was kind of the icing on the cake there.
See, I kind of look at it a little bit of a different way. Like, you're saying, Lacob, he has a negotiating tactic that he wants to do. And we know that Klay is
he's a billionaire. He's used to get, he's very shrewd.
That's how he does things. But Klay, he is his own person too. He has his own feelings too and how he goes about things. There's a story that Steve Kerr would always tell early on in his time with the Warriors where, he's going through that time where he's kind of learning how he can be with certain players. Like, the way he talks to Draymond is not the same way he talks to Steph. It's not the same way that he would talk to Iggy. It's not the same way that he would talk to Klay. And when he got to Klay, I remember he would tell the story about how early on in his time coaching the Warriors, he yelled at Klay during practice. A lot of coaches, they yell at players, rah, do your thing, blah, blah, blah. And Klay kind of retreated within himself in that moment. And Steve, he kind of tells a story about how he realized if I need to connect with Klay, I can't do it in a way that I think works. I need to learn what he responds to. I need to adjust to my player and relate to him that
As
way.
good coaches or bosses do.
Exactly. Steve, he would get into it with Draymond because Draymond's the kind of guy that you could yell at Draymond. Draymond will yell back. That's how Draymond responds.
And Steve Kerr went at it with Michael Jordan, right? So he understands getting punched by someone as well.
Exactly. Like Kerr gets it. He understands, people talk about what does Steve Kerr do and all this criticism of Steve Kerr. And you always talk about the personalities that you have to manage here. Managing personalities is such a bigger part of an NBA coach's job than I think people really want to realize. So Steve understood early on that he can't approach Klay the same that he would with other players. Like Draymond, he can get to a screaming match with him. That's not how it works with Klay. For Joe Lacob, though, I think it's a little bit different. Obviously, you're in the business aspect of it, but it seemed that Joe Lacob used his one-size-fits-all approach where, the way I'm going to act with Draymond, the way I'm going to act with Steph, the way I'm going to act with Steve, I'm also going to apply that to Klay Thompson. I'm not going to acknowledge that Klay Thompson is his own different person, his own, has his own emotions and reactions to things, and that will influence how I talk to him. So when Joe does that whole, well, I'm just not going to say anything and play hardball, that I think it's easy to say that you kind of misread that situation if you're Lacob. That's not what I'm saying though, but I do think if Joe Lacob is sitting in his office, say thinking, well, I don't understand. Where did I go wrong here? Like I did everything right, I thought. No, Joe, I think you kind of misread your player here. And whether you're okay with that or not is your own personal battle to deal with now for the rest of your life. But that's how I read it, is that, Klay, he wanted the love to be shown to him. And Lacob, it's like, I do things my way. And he didn't take the time, or maybe he did and just decided not to go down that road of just recognizing that maybe the way I handled the contract situation with Draymond, maybe that approach won't work with Klay, and I need to do a different approach.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that contract with Draymond. Here is Joe Lacob in studio, because I have the sound of when he joined Bonte and Shasky earlier in the season, Sam Lubman, talking about, and this was kind of a throwaway line that I thought was fascinating, and we all kind of went back to it. Talking about the contract negotiations with Draymond Green. Take a listen to Joe Lacob in studio last year at 95.7 The Game.
I was pretty convinced he'd be back, to be honest. But to sit here and I can't lie. I mean, there was a possibility he could have left, certainly. He had another opportunity that, he's talked about possibly to move. But I think he wanted to be back and we wanted to be back. And, we had the resources to do it. It just had to make sense. Mm-hmm. And he came to my house. We had a long discussion about it, one-on-one. I was pretty convinced we're going to be able to get it done.
They had a conversation at his house. He drove to his house to do that. Yeah. Clay's not doing that.
No, Clay's not driving over to Lacob's house.
That. No.
He's not boating over to Lacob's house. No. And I might leave Steph out of this conversation because Lacob would go to Steph. I think that's the one guy
Steph wanted to be left. Well, not even Steph, but Klay wanted Steph to be out of this conversation. Yeah. So I think Steph honored that and was like, he might have said something. He's like, guys, listen, this is my guy. This is my homie. This is my brother. Mm-hmm. I'm going to leave it at that. You know how I feel about it, but Klay has asked me not to speak on it. So I'm just going to leave it at that, but you know how I feel. That's kind of what I thought.
Even so, like Lacob probably isn't treating Steph this way. Lacob is probably going over to Steph's house and getting this done.
Correct.
But that's a lot different because Steph is the Warriors. Steph predated Lacob. Steph is probably the only person whose voice in the building carries as much weight as Lacob's. If there were to be a tiebreaker scenario there, Lacob owns the keys to the building, so that kind of gives him a little bit of a leg up there. But if Steph and Lacob ever went to battle and it became a battle of who's going to win over the hearts and minds of the fan base, there ain't a soul in this region that is choosing
House of Dragon, House of Warriors.
No, if there's ever,
it's all Team Steph is going to win.
It's all
He's
Team
got all
Steph.
The dragons.
Steph is Team Black all the way. No one's getting behind Allison Lacob, and
there you go.
In that situation,
Spoiler alert, it ends badly for everyone.
No one has a happy ending.
Yes, there you go.
It's the Game of Thrones universe. There are no happy endings.
Never.
Was as Ramsey said, if you think this has an happy ending, you have not been paying attention.
Shout out Reek, aka Theon.
Oh yeah, season 3 references of Game of Thrones. But yeah, so that's an entirely different conversation there, and we'll see what the Steph contract talks look like. We know that he is eligible for an extension at some point soon. Even as early as this summer, they could put that together, and Steph, he's locked until his age 38 season. We'll see if the Warriors maybe add 2-3 years onto that to try and keep this window going, because even at age 40, I still think if you have a 40-year-old Steph on your team, you have a weapon that'll get you into contention.
Yeah, I don't compare this. A lot of people are saying, like, if they don't get Lauri Markkanen or anything like that, and I don't even think Lauri Markkanen, right, I don't think he's going to be that guy to put them over the top. So I think they'll be a playoff team, a contender to win a title. I'm not sure. Maybe win a series. We shall see. But this notion that if they don't land another number 2 like star player, it's going to be the Kobe years. The Kobe, and for the last couple years in the Lakers, they didn't make the playoffs. He was an old guy. It wasn't a lot around him, but you paid Kobe to just be Kobe, and people were going to come to see him regardless. And Steph never had an Achilles injury like Kobe did. And knock on wood that he never has that, but it was so much different. Steph is still a top 10 player at his age. He's going to be 37 years old next year. Like, he is still a top 10 player in today's NBA. LeBron James, he's going to be 40 years old, which is crazy. I've been watching LeBron James and all of us since we were like in 4th grade. It's kind of crazy to see that. It's honestly weird to think. 2 kids now. It's just crazy. It's just crazy, Sam.
I mean, there are kids, there's probably people in the league who grew up watching LeBron James, enter the league, play basketball against LeBron James, and then have their careers end for whatever reason. They're not good or something. Like,
there was a Houston Rockets player, a junior, I forget who it was. They're like, yeah, man, you played with my dad in the league, and now he's playing against him, and LeBron's like, oh my God.
It's absolutely.
And now LeBron's going to be playing with his son. And by the way, Bronny James, you can see him at the California Classic this weekend at Chase Center starting July 6th, a summer basketball showcase featuring 2024 NBA draft picks, second-year pros, and more players. Go to Warriors.com for your tickets. All brought to you by Clean California. Remember, just one piece of litter can ruin the game. 0 litter is the goal. Carter,
don't be a quitter.
I don't like litter bugs. I don't like them at all. I hate cockroaches, I hate flies, and I hate litter bugs.
I'm going to pick around. How about GP2? Just to really put LeBron's career in perspective here. GP2's our age, Spadoni. If GP2 retired tomorrow, for whatever reason, his entire career would have taken, his entire almost life basically took place during LeBron's career.
LeBron played against his dad, Gary Payton Sr.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That's how long he's been around. But, to your point, you're mentioning, if the window closes or whatnot. I mean, with Steph, even if they don't land Lowry this year, even if they do just decide to take the step back and reset the books, if that is the plan that Lacob wants to do, if that was kind of why Lacob decided not to prioritize bringing Klay back, because he is, that hell-bent on getting underneath the luxury tax threshold here. I kind of get that, because you reset your books this year. The salary cap this year is going to be at $141 million. The luxury tax is at $171, and the first apron is at $178. Those numbers jump to $155, $188, and $196 next year, and then $170, $207, $215 the year after that. So the salary cap, it is going up, and there are going to be free agents available on the market for the Warriors to go after. So if you reset your books this year, if that is Lacob's plan, then I get that, because Steph will be a good recruiting chip in that endeavor. But, bringing this back to Klay, and I think if you're Joe Lacob, I think at some point, the fact that Klay never had the conversation with Lacob that he wanted, the fact that they went down to the Riviera and they never really talked business, I kind of wish that Lacob maybe didn't take that approach with him. Just be upfront, be like, Klay, it's the reality.
Yeah.
We need to move forward here.
I think he needed to save face in the public a little bit. I think that's kind of like, and you have to balance these things where there's this tricky little game. You're going to go back to Game of Thrones. Who wins in the eyes of the public is always it's a thing. They don't really talk about it outwardly, but that is a thing where you're trying to, get out ahead of someone. Oh, we were very in on Paul George. I mean, Kawakami had the piece. They were so in on Paul George. They were going to give everything. Oh, it's just, I can't believe the Clippers deny that deal. Well, was Jonathan Kuminga really a part of it? Because now I'm seeing reports from Ramona Shelburne that says Kuminga was never part of the talks. So then you were never going to get Paul George. And I don't think the Clippers were going to help out a Western Conference team anyways. And they're opening up a new building.
Especially not going to be the Warriors.
Well, no, because the Clippers are already losing Paul George no matter what. They're going to be a fringe playoff team. They don't want to look at another fringe playoff team. Like, the Clippers need to make the playoffs. They're going to have season ticket holders that they need to entertain entering a new building. Steve Ballmer and co, the Intuit Dome, whatever they're calling it, down in Inglewood, California. They're not going to help a Western Conference team. So they'll let him go for bones if an Eastern Conference team like the Sixers aren't going to offer anything to begin with. They'll just say, all right, We'll see it, Paul George. So you need to win the eyes of the public opinion, if you will. And I think Lacob during these contract negotiations was very shrewd in that way, trying to be, I don't know how I want to say this. He wants to weave in between that level there. And I thought this was fascinating from Anthony Slater early on in the week. Again, our 95.7 The Game Warriors insider talking with Shasky and Bonte, talking about if the Warriors really wanted Klay back, if Joe Lacob really wanted him back, he'd be back.
I think if they wanted him back, it was a really a top priority, they would have handled the negotiations as such. But again, I'm not even sitting here trying to criticize what they've tried to do this summer. Now, they haven't been effective to this point in doing it, but they could have been more communicative. They could have rewarded him a little bit more. I mean, people will mention the 2 for $48 last summer, so they kind of feel like they did lay a good market contract on the table. Again, there's I don't think both sides feel the same about, that offer in general, but again, they could have just tried to pay him quicker, try to pay him more, longer, right? Pair him up a little bit, with Draymond Green's number, with Wiggins' number.
So if Joe Lacob really wanted him back, he'd be back. He didn't, and that's the thing. That's why they tiptoed around this. That's why they didn't offer any new contracts. That's why they didn't do any of that. They were okay with moving on from Klay Thompson, and our Warriors fans okay with ownership basically saying, we're good off Klay Thompson. 888-957-9570.
That's a good way to point it. Yeah, it's ownership kind of made it clear. Now, I'm kind of curious, and again, this is for the 30 for 30 to tell us later, when was the moment that Klay realized, I need to move on? I'm very curious when that moment hit him. Was it when he went to the bench? Was it at the end of the season? Was it before this season? So I'm very curious as to when that moment came.
Well, it's interesting reading again. There's so many articles without this, so forgive me, and I'm doing my best to kind of do everything. Kendra Andrews and Ramona Shelburne of ESPN, they had an article. Anthony Slater of The Athletic, along with Shams Charania, they had their article. That's 2 of them. Logan Murdoch had a piece. That's Logan Murdoch and Marcus Thompson's piece from The Ringer and from The Athletic, respectively. They were number 4, more so of the emotional side and what he meant to the area, but also about the mentals of him, trying to go more of a deep look on it. The ESPN and The Athletic articles with Slater and Shams and Ramona Shelburne, they were more of kind of the X's and O's and what took place. These were the moments that led up to everything.
Yeah, and then Sam Amick also had.
Sam Amick
had his. This is why he turned down the Lakers.
I think Kawakami had one too. So that
Kawakami had he had the instant. So we got 6 so far. I don't know who else we're waiting on here.
But in that, and God, I forgot where my thought, because I was just going down all the different rabbit holes of all the things. But Kendra Andrews and Ramona Shelburne, talking about in that piece, basically saying, it came clear, and it wasn't so much so last year, the year before that, but in a way, this has been something that's been brewing since the NBA Finals that the Warriors have been bracing themselves with. Ever since the NBA Finals, when they won it, they were dreading paying Klay Thompson. That's kind of what I gathered from that article, which is nuts to me, considering he came back from 2 injuries, and maybe it shouldn't be that surprising because he came off an ACL and Achilles injury, and for most players, that's it. For most players, that's it. But Klay Thompson meant so much. You paid him because of what he did for you and what he could potentially still do for you. You paid him all that money because you were hoping that maybe, just maybe, he could be different. But they kind of knew. Bob Myers knew. Joe Lacob knew. Rick Celebrini knew, the head athletic director, the trainer there for the Athletics. And by the way, shout out his son Macklin, who's number 1 overall pick for the San Jose Sharks. High hockey prospect going to San Jose. Joined Steiny and Guru yesterday. Find that entire interview. It was awesome. But they all kind of knew that, hey, listen, he's not going to be the same guy.
Yeah.
But we're going to wait and see this thing out. So even back to the NBA Finals, since then, they've been kind of bracing for this.
Wow, dude.
So it's not just one thing. Now it's a culmination, but even they knew the end was near after the injuries, which doesn't make it any easier, Sam.
Yeah,
but they knew.
No, guys, I think I started the show. You know it's coming. You can try and steel yourself from it, but yeah, it was a culmination sensation, as we like to say.
That's a buck.
There.
Thank you. Shout out Dibbs and Willard.
But yeah, and of course, Ed Shasky just sent this to our thread. He highlighted this tweet that Kareth Burke highlighted, where the way that the Warriors kind of handle things is that not only were there was the story that Klay what did he do? He basically, he said he would be down for 2 years, $40 million.
That's what they said in the like Kendra Andrews piece.
Yeah,
yes.
so Kendra said that. I'm losing track of who's saying what and all these pieces.
I know.
There's 6 pieces that we got to keep track of.
That's right.
Here.
Shout out Michael Jordan, 6
But
piece.
I'm seeing this here that Kareth highlighted from the Sam Amick piece, where basically, there were these offers that Klay made. The Warriors didn't even make counter offers. So it's just, as she put, how do you treat a guy whose number you retire? Like, Joe Lacob, I get the business aspect of it. I get this is a business. It's nothing personal. Shout out David Sampson. But you also have to remember, like, these are still people. These are still human beings. And these are still people that have a very deep emotional tie to this fan base, to this region, especially Klay, who I think was far more emotionally invested in this area than Steph or Draymond Green. I'm not saying that those two weren't invested, but with Klay, it just felt like it was at a different level. Klay truly was one of the people. And to just kind of make it business as usual with him when you didn't do that with Draymond, when we know you wouldn't do that with Steph, it's just, that doesn't sit well with me. And it's not going to overall change my opinion on Joe Lacob. I still think he's the only good owner in sports. But this does kind of take some of the shine off of him. And I hope this isn't the beginning of a pattern when it comes to Lacob, because this was, that Midas touch that he has, it's not looking as Midas-y touchy in these last few years.
It's really difficult. The end of a dynasty, this is what it looks like. Like, this is tough. Like,
what dynasty ever ends clean, really?
None. Like,
even the Last Dance didn't end clean.
Not even that. They won, but then Jordan left. Like, so we all kind of think like, oh, it really was the Last Dance for everyone, because everyone was going their separate ways. There was toxicity between the general manager, Jerry Krause, all of that. Phil Jackson was tired. He wanted to leave. He ends up going to the Lakers. Like, there's this, that really was just that they're on their last legs. And Steve Kerr, who was a part of that, who joins us every regular season on Willard and Dib and stuff, like he even mentioned that, like, hey, it was the end. Like, everyone was done. Like, and we're not at that level yet with Steph, obviously, and Draymond still being a part of that. But a third of that kind of, like, if you just have a statue, right? Like, you're just taking bits and pieces away from it. That dynasty, like, a big part of that statue of this dynasty has been taken away because Klay Thompson's gone. Andre Iguodala's gone. Obviously, Kevin Durant's been gone. And now that remains is, and if you want to put Kevon Looney there, and I think Kevon deserves his flowers somewhat, and that's fine. But specifically Stephen Curry and Draymond Green, like, it's on its last legs here. And I understand the desperation Warriors fans feel right now, and we're on Lowry Markkanen watch. That's why it's so important for these fans to want to try to help Steph and try to get something. Like, I want to see one last playoff run. If Warriors fans could have one last playoff run at this point, I think they'd be okay.
Even if it doesn't end in the title?
Even if it doesn't end in the title.
You just want to go on the trip?
Correct. First of all, can you just not get destroyed in a play-in game against the Sacramento Kings without, Kevin Huerter or Malik Monk? Can we do that, please? That's why getting Lowry Markkanen is so important. But they lose part of their soul when they lost Klay Thompson. 888-957-9570. We got the injury report coming up here shortly. We got Dave Fleming coming on in about 7 minutes.